Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Ash McCaskill. I'm the programs coordinator at AgeWell. I'm so excited to be here with you all today, and thanks for giving me the time. So maybe we can just start by giving some accessibility points. But for now, tell me where you're coming from today. If you can just type in the chat. So today I'm coming from Montreal, Quebec. I am doing today's webinar from my bedroom. Full transparency, we have our son is at home. He is sick. He's 2, so you might hear some playing in the background. So I apologize, and some coughing. But you know what? Sometimes we have to work from what I call our soft offices. So just before we begin today, I do just want to begin with just some accessibility points. So please note that today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on the AgeWell website at the end after the webinar. There is closed captioning available. So if you are someone that maybe is hard of hearing, or sometimes I also say sometimes it's beneficial for those that are maybe not English first language speakers. You'll see it at the bottom of your window. It'll have 2 CCs. And yeah, you can use that to follow along. And that reminds me that I should speak a little bit slower as well. I also have just some other things as my son knocks at the door. Please note that at the end of today's webinar, there will be a Q&A. And so if you have any questions or resources that you want to share, feel free to put that in the Q&A or also in the chat. And I do encourage everyone to use the chat throughout today's presentation. I think this is definitely going to be a session where we are all sharing resources and we're all sharing tools. So please stay active in the chat today. I'm sure there's going to be things that a lot of you are going to want to build on. And also, just to ensure that everyone has a good experience today, we really want to ensure that, everyone is being respectful and sharing kindness as we're sharing this virtual space today. So if there is anyone that's showing any form of harassment, that person will be quickly removed from today's webinar. Okay. So I'm just going to share my screen and let's get started. Okay, so promising recruitment practices and AgeWell how-to. So I would like just to start by saying that this is something that when I say promising practices, I don't say best practices. The reason why I usually gear away from saying best practices is because promising practices build in that flexibility, because often we can't create like one model of doing something that's going to work for everything. So this is why we use the term promising practices. So just for today, here's just a breakdown of what I will be doing with you all today. So I will be going through just a brief kind of introduction of what AgeWell is. And I will also be kind of discussing what are some of the challenges some of us face with recruitment for older adults and caregivers. And then I'm going to go into some innovative strategies and examples of how to recruit older adults into your research, or beyond that, just into any type of activity that you're doing, whether that be through community engagement. Perhaps you are interested in learning more about an older adults and a specific health condition. A lot of these will be interconnected. A lot of the methods I'll be discussing today are really interconnected and useful in many different approaches. And then I'll also kind of share how you can share your research calls with AgeWell. And I should preface that with AgeWell specifically, if you are sharing a research call, this is only for our network members. However, what I will be sharing will be applicable, the format that I will be sharing will be applicable to many types of organizations. So don't just feel like if you're not an HWell member, that doesn't mean that what I'm going to be sharing within that specific section won't be applicable to other organizations that maybe you can do that research call with. And then after that, we will have questions. Okay. So I first want to begin by just giving a little bit more about AgeWell. So AgeWell is Canada's largest aging and technology network in Canada. We are really big. Some of the numbers that you see here, we have 47 members across 47 universities and research centers that are affiliated and members with us. We have over 420 plus partners, and you'll see the breakdown of industry, academic, not-for-profit, and government. And I mean, it's just growing all the time, which is so exciting. So AgeWell is a unique Canadian network because it brings together everyone, literally. It brings together industry, government, academia, those that are new, older adult and caregiver stakeholders, community organizations, not-for-profits. We bring these entities together and we really work together to develop technologies and services for healthy aging, I'm sorry. We're also really into training the next generations of innovators in the field of age tech, and making Canada a world leader in technologies that help the aging populations everywhere. We have amazing training programs like EPIC AT and EPIC, which really are looking at funding and training undergrads, graduate students, and postdocs, also early career researchers, clinicians, and research professionals, and thinking about how they can improve their research, but also think about it in different ways beyond the traditional training of just academic focus. How can we engage in co-design? How can we think about our research in ways that maybe could be a future commercialization of that innovation? And we are growing. We are not this tiny non-for-profit. We are very large, and we have a growing international presence in Australia, Belgium, Denmark, France, Mexico, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And so for us, the challenge is, as innovators, and for all of you, is to really think about how we can make that change a positive one as we are thinking about technology and how it's engaging with older adults, especially with complex health needs. And so for me, a big part of this is recruitment. And recruitment is about making and creating relationships. And those relationships are the ones that are the people that I would define as our collaborators, our partners, our research partners, participants, and also co-designers. So when I say recruitment and relationships, this is what I mean. We need to work relationally. We need to work with trust. We need to value the lived experiences of our potential users and knowledge stakeholders. And I'm going to define some of these things as we move through the presentation today together. We need to undo our own perceptions and preconceived notions of our research, meaning we need to undo what we think it's going to do and what it's going to mean to the communities that we are creating these solutions for. We need to be working with them from the beginning of our research, not just as we create the innovation and then ask for feedback after something is developed. And most importantly, we need to listen and learn to the need. We need to learn and listen to the needs and wants and priorities of caregivers and older adults. This is very important. And today I'll kind of give some ways of how to think about how to listen to older adults and caregivers, especially in that recruitment process. So I'm going to start with a first question. In the chat, if you could name if you could name one challenge you have personally faced when starting your recruitment process for older adults, a challenge that you feel like is really important. And I call it popcorn chat. So don't necessarily overthink what you're going to share. Just even a one word is great. So I'm going to stop sharing. Let's do that together. Let's think about that. What are some of the challenges that some of you have faced when recruiting older adults? Okay, let's see if there's any bites. If that's okay, if you're a bit shy, but let's go. Let's think about it. Okay, Michelle says getting the message out to them. Great. Brittany, recruiting people outside of our immediate network, awareness of research. Great. Olive, needing guidelines. All right. Henya, technical terms on consent forms. Okay, let's keep going. What are other ones? Farah, challenges of recruiting equity deserving groups. Really important one. Really, really important. And we'll touch on that today. Absolutely. Okay. Are there other ones? Okay. Azan, what ages define older adult? Ah, good one. That's a very good question. How do we define who is an older adult and who isn't? And I see some people that are in attendance today. I encourage people to feel free to respond to some of these questions. It really depends on what institution you're at. That's a great question. Olive, having a training program for older adults. Absolutely. Okay. These are all awesome. Keep them coming. And Brittany says how to recruit people without cell phone or computers at home. Yeah, these are all really, really great ones. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. So you guys have all listed really, really important ones, which is the fact of that there are many challenges that come with recruiting older adults and caregivers. And, oddly enough, even though I'm focusing on older adults and caregivers today, a lot of the things that we're talking about are not just exclusive to older adults. We're talking about the challenges of recruitment in general. So some of them that I've included here are recruitment is often, particularly challenging, especially when you're trying to connect with communities that are outside of your own day-to-day experiences. So some of these challenges can include physical limitations. So for example, perhaps the people that you want to connect with live in more rural areas or remote areas. Or perhaps they have mobility issues that create challenges for them to travel from point A to point B, meaning the point that maybe you will be hosting some of your research participation work. There's also the big challenge, which is some of you are working with members of the Alzheimer and dementia community. There's that big issue of consent, which I do want to say that, and I want to emphasize that those with dementia and Alzheimer's do have the right to consent for themselves. And there's an organization that I will talk about later in the presentation that talks about this and advocates for it. And also the institutions that you are working from, so those universities, each university sometimes has had different experiences, especially for those with cognitive disability. They might have different ways of understanding and approving a project with working with people or prioritizing those from the dementia community. And I encourage you to, if you get feedback from your ethics and they say, well, you need to have a different form of consent, I really encourage you to feel free to say, well, that's actually not, they have the right to consent for themselves, and this is why. So always remember that sometimes the projects that you're doing are going to be new to some of your ethics boards, and it's okay to kind of fight back a little bit, if you will. And I don't mean that in the literal sense. I mean, it's okay to justify why you think the way you're doing your research is more correct than, say, some of the ways that they're recommending. You're creating new standards of doing things, and we're all for that. The other kind of big thing is trust and reluctance. Sometimes older adults may feel cautious to participate with a project, whether that be because maybe of a previous negative experience with a research project, or because there's this fear of participating in something that's unknown to them or new. There's also the time commitment issue. So truth of the matter is, in my opinion, the busiest people I know are older adults. They are very, very active in their communities. You know, they often have family commitments, and are also, you know, participating in other kind of activities in their, whether that be, you know, physical in terms of sports or leisure, but they are busy people, and some of them actually are still working. There's like kind of an assumption that older adults stop working at a certain age. A lot of people still working well into their 80s, 90s. You'd be very surprised. So they are busy people. There's also sometimes communication barriers. So that might be because of maybe the assumed digital divide. Some of the people might be new to Zoom, and learning some of these new ways of working remotely might be intimidating. And there's also just like language barriers. Academically, we're trained to speak a certain way, and that is often inaccessible to a lot of communities. So it really is about, you know, how we're thinking through these things. And just to kind of, you know, wrap it up, you know, major things like socioeconomics, they might be limited with the financial ability to travel to where you are, or also just cultural sense differences. There might be sensitivities to the type of work you're doing, and it might go against some of their own belief systems. And stigma. Some people don't like being referred to as an older adult or old or frail. And so they might not feel comfortable with the way that you have put language around your work. So these are some things that might come up. But as a researcher, it's really important to remember that it's your job to address these challenges in a meaningful and really strategic recruitment strategy. Using clear communication and respecting the autonomy and well-being of your potential participants. So the big question is, where do you begin? Where do you begin? And so today I just want to mention that I will be building up on a previous webinar that I did. So I'm going to be kind of talking about other ways that you can recruit. So when I share this webinar, I will make sure to also reshare the link to the recording that I did in the spring on older adult recruitment. So let's go to the next thing. So create a brand for your project. And you're like, Ash, I'm not a marketer. I don't have a graphic design background. Like, how do I do this? And why is it important to create a logo or a brand for my project? Let me tell you. So for sure, one of the big reasons why you want to create a logo or brand is it really will help you create recruitment materials, which like will have, you know, key advantages. Particularly, it will help make your project stand out across different platforms. So what that means is perhaps you're going to be using social media or email, or maybe you'll be putting up posters in a specific, you know, long-term care home. Having that logo builds such a presence and trust with the people that you hope to work with. They will remember that image, and there will be a feeling to that image. So creating that logo is very important. And then also it will convey an increased sense of professionalism and increased visibility. So what that means is beyond just like having a poster with information, if you have that logo, it will stand out. There'll be a sense of this person knows what they're doing and they have done this before. I can tell you that also with logos, they create a lot of interest from potential participants. What that means is often if you just had a poster with just an image and information, which is still very good, but if you have that logo, I can tell you in my experiences, the increase of engagement from older adults or other just generally just participants triples. And no, I don't have like perfect research to show that, but it's just within my experiences and observations as a researcher with my own projects, but also with projects that I've been affiliated with. And there's my son. one of the things to consider is it also has the potential to attract a specific audience. So potentially, if you're working or trying to work with a specific cultural group, having a branding that maybe incorporates specific images or symbols or ways of thinking in that image and that branding, that will be very meaningful to the groups that you're trying to work with. And that includes even just like having the specific brand in the language of the groups that you're working with. And also it helps communicate key information. So let me share just some examples of some logos that I have like been, exposed to or been a part of in terms of the branding. So one of them is my colleague, Dr. Ali Bailey, on her project called Revisioning Fitness, which you'll see on the left. And she did this, and this is a project working with the disability community and rethinking what the fitness industry, the ableism of the fitness industry. At the bottom, you'll also see a really great project that's really focusing on young caregivers. And that is the Caring for Carers project, which I am a really big fan of in terms of what they're doing. And they have a really specific branding and color, which makes them stand out. And then, of course, you have the social robots, which really looks at, robots and older adults, and very simple logo, but effective. On the other side, you'll also see ACT, which is a project that is based in Concordia University. Yes, I see Brittany's also giving the love for Caring for Carers. Yeah, they're awesome. They're based in Toronto, by the way. And the ACT is Aging Communication and Technology. And they're a project based at Concordia University, Montreal, Quebec, that focuses on how to undo that digital divide and assumptions that often a lot of us have with older adults and their digital literacy skills. And then in the middle, you'll see Connections Conversations, which is actually a community outreach event that we do here at AgeWell, which brings together older adult networks. And it's also a public-facing event that we do bi-monthly that brings together older adults to discuss their experiences of aging and technology over Zoom in a very friendly and relaxed, comfortable environment. And this was a rebranding we recently did in the winter of this past year of 2023. And you'll see that we did the branding in a way that showed conversation, that had a bit of color in terms of the actual branding itself, but was also very clear. And with that, we also got feedback from members of our older adult and caregiver advisory board. I know Olive is here today, so Olive was also part of that process. And I can truly tell you, when we rebranded this, previously the event maybe had between maybe like 5 to 10 people that would attend and register. And so when we rebranded this, just this alone, I now have up to 30 people registering for this event after just rebranding. And I'll talk more about that. But it just goes to show what an image and a logo can do to help really enhance that recruitment. So yeah, these are some great images. So the other thing that I want to talk about is, how do we move beyond the poster? How do we really think about, okay, we have posters, they're very important, and maybe I have a logo, but how else can I engage in thinking through recruitment? And so I call this, moving beyond the poster. So it's really important to think about this, because when you start thinking about other ways of recruiting and using more diverse methods, you're going to be opening up the pool to people that you're going to be reaching out to. And those will probably include people that often you had not even thought about in your kind of important populations of who you want to engage with. So really, really important. It's very important to know that especially if you're considering, social media or, even like Instagram, uh, that there's this assumption that it won't reach a lot of older adults. Don't assume that. Older adults are very, very digitally savvy. A lot of them are very much coming online now, especially after during the pandemic. They would come on and use social media, Facebook or Instagram, to connect with their family members. So they're very digitally savvy. Um, so I really encourage you all to use a plethora of online platforms and social media. And that's not to say that even if that a person does not use it, that doesn't mean that someone they don't know uses it and will share that information with their friend. It's very important to remember that word of mouth is a huge form of recruitment. And often happens in ways that are behind the scenes from the ways that we could have imagined in our recruitment processes. And so when you're doing this, make sure that you are, using different recruitment methods and thinking about how you're thinking about how that will reach a different representation of people. Who's to say that your recruitment won't go viral, your recruitment approach? And again, that logo that you create for that project will be something that you'll continue to use in all the different forms of recruitment. And there's this higher chance, especially when you're using a plethora of digital platforms, that there will be repeated exposure to the call that you're creating. And what I really want to point out too is as you are, creating your logo and other things that I'll be sharing today, don't just remember that you're also creating new skills along the way. So, for example, you might be learning how to edit, learning that you are potentially a novel graphic designer or producer. Don't be scared to be creative. Get fun with this recruitment process. And I'm telling you, those potential participants are going to notice that. And I can share more about that. How to create a logo. Things that you can use is like something as simple as just typing in Google Microsoft Art, that some of us used that when we were, a little bit younger, from the 90s. Like there is forms of that you can go online now and you can just use Microsoft Art to make like a really interesting logo. I've done that actually for my own projects because I don't come from a graphic design background. And I'll literally just, what I will do is just take a screenshot of what I've done and reuse that. And it's just playing with shapes, fonts. Be careful with the way you use clip art because you definitely want to look at the representation of the work that you're doing. You don't want to just, use an older adult in a wheelchair or with a walker. That's kind of creating that stigma again of what aging always is and looks like, because aging comes in different forms. So really just be creative and have fun, but get feedback too if you're, concerned if it's something that you feel like is effective. So the next thing that I want to say, and I think this is a really important one. Some of you were saying, how does one recruit people that maybe are definitely equity deserving groups, or those that maybe it's hard for them to understand and follow the work. Also, sometimes just even literacy is a big thing. So I always really want to say, make an informational short video. So what this is a video that's under 2 minutes. It's something that you just want to be able to share online, or for example, someone that they know could, a person that your potential recruit participant, someone that maybe they've received it via email. But a video is a great way of doing this. So keep it under 2 minutes. Warmly introduce yourself, team, and project. And share the benefits of participating with the process and time commitment. And consider including, previous testimonials. So maybe you're a more experienced researcher and you've worked with some older adults before. Include maybe that older adult in that video to kind of testify to the type of work that you're doing. And that will actually enhance the potential of credibility to you as a researcher and the work that you're trying to do. Also, it brings, when you have someone from the community in the video, especially for the type of work that you're doing, if it's like a community member from the group that is directly affected from the research that you're trying to help promote, it really helps create a connection to potential participants. It helps also build trust right from the get-go. And lead with a story. I think this is a really important way. Often, especially even when you're giving a pitch, if you lead with a story as to how you started and, with this research, why you're doing this research, why are you the best person to do this research? If you lead with a bit of a story to introduce yourself, that really creates a human element to that recruitment process and will create an interest from your potential older adult participants. So lead with that story. How did you arrive to this research? I can't tell you how many times in my own work as a researcher in disability and arts, how many times so many of my participants over the years was like, well, Ash, how did you even start in this field? And then I said, oh, I guess I should have maybe started with that. And this is where you can do that in this video. And really make sure that you're using an engaging and accessible tone. So what I often like to say, and I also said this at the Age Well conference about even posters in general. Think of this moment as almost like your 2-minute TED talk about your research. And I'm wondering in the chat, maybe tell me what are, with a great TED talk, what are things that you think are important? What makes a TED talk memorable and exciting? Let's think about that. Anyone in there that wants to share, why is a TED talk such a simplicity? Sydney said simplicity. Great. That is so true, because you're leaving with a simple message. There's something that you can take away. That is such a great one. Anyone else? TED Talks, or just an engaging speaker. What is it about them that we appreciate when we can remember them? What makes it impactful? Thank you, Hanya. Yes, impactful. So we know that what they're doing has an impact. We get the greater picture right away. Passion for the topic, Farah. Yes, great. And that again is using that story. Talks, Olive says, talks that are short and exciting. And that's a great point. It's really important to remember that there is, especially with videos, often people will not listen to the video the entire duration. It will only be that 2 minutes. And that's why it's so recommended to keep it 2 minutes. I mean, yes, you have to kind of get in a lot in there, but at the end of the day, it's really important to remember that, you can do a lot in 2 minutes. And this is also great practice for those, potential future pitches that you'll be doing. Nicole says, on the same vein, clarity. I want to understand even without background. Yes, absolutely. So sometimes maybe you don't have, you can't include everything in the kitchen sink, right? So think about what are those important points, and we can discuss that soon. Yes, Brittany also said pacing and connecting with the audience. Get them to think about how your topic is important to them. Yes, that's the big thing, the big so what. And especially for those of you that are doing this work without necessarily having funding to give compensation for your research participants, really underscoring that so what is what's going to really help that recruitment process if there isn't that kind of compensation incentive. Yes, and Elham says it is a real story. Yeah. So for some of you that are entering this work, there might be a very personal reason as to why you're doing it. Now, if that's up to you to disclose or not, but I can tell you sometimes when we do share why we're doing the work that we do in those kind of recruitment materials, it creates such a connection and trust with those potential participants. And if you're entering as an ally, that's also something really important to say. It shows that you care, and that says a lot. It leads with feeling. And I can tell you right now, if a potential older adult participant is watching that video and leaves watching that video with a feeling, you have a very strong chance of having them as a potential research participant. And Sydney just finally says, adding to Nicole's, there is an easy to follow storyline. Absolutely. So you want to make sure that as you're doing that short video, that it's structured in a way that is not chaotic, and follows a kind of a linear storyline, even if there isn't a specific story, but it really says, this is where I started, this is what I want to do, this is how I want to, and this is why I would love to include you in this project and how. Okay, great. So I want to share, and let me know in the chat, guys, if you can hear it. I'm going to actually share the video, the rebranding of the video for Connections Conversations. And you're going to see some of the actual accessibility notes that I did to create it to be more shareable, which is like with closed captions. Let me know if you can hear it. If you can't, there is closed captions, but let me know if you can hear it in the chat.
Hope
Hoping you can hear it.
The conversations are really an opportunity for older adults to connect and share their experiences in aging, and what can they do to help make them more safe in aging in place.
A face-to-face Zoom-linked chance for Canadian elders to talk to other seniors about anything of interest to them.
I think it's really important for sharing ideas related to aging well and their experiences, because everyone has different experiences. It's great to hear how other people deal with issues or concerns they may have.
Do come and meet and share with other older adults who are figuring out how to age in place safely and a really relaxing and friendly atmosphere.
I just love that. By the way, the musical accompaniment of that is our amazing Bern Evans from our older adult and caregiver advisory board. And also it featured Sherry Baker, who is the co-chair of the older adult and caregiver advisory board, and also our other esteemed member, Dr. Olive Bryanton, who's also here today. Thanks, Olive, for coming. What were things that stood out there for you guys? What was it that you feel like was effective in that video? That you think would be important to include in other recruitment videos? Anyone want to share? It's okay. Okay, Brittany says representation from the people it is directed at. Yeah, absolutely. Sydney G, we have Sydney T and Sydney G. Warm voice singing felt safe. Yeah. Just having that kind of a creative element is a really great point. Nicole says, nice distinct message, clear and concise. Farah said, testimonial worked great. Again, there's that testimonial element. Yeah, that's great. We're going to continue. I'm going to actually play another video. This is actually by Caring for Carers, that amazing group that I mentioned with the purple logo. This was actually done by the team member Ty, who actually did this at home. And again, you don't need to have these amazing like production skills to do things. And I can share some actual ways of doing this, like some kind of, if you're new to kind of production, if you will, ways of doing it, you can shoot this on your phone. But let's watch this one together and get some talk about it.
Are you a post-secondary student with tons of homework and deadlines who's also providing care to someone living with dementia? If this is you, maybe you're feeling overwhelmed or too busy for a social life, or maybe like nobody understands you. If this is you, then good news, you are not alone. Here's your chance to be seen and heard. Hi, my name's Tyler, and not long ago, I was a young caregiver for my grandmother Alicia, who's living with dementia. Caregiving can be really, really difficult, especially if you feel alone. But that's where our team, Caring for Carers, comes in. We're a group of master's students in the Translational Research Program at the University of Toronto, and we want to know about your experiences with social connection.
Social connection? What's that?
Excellent question, Michaela. Social connection refers to how individuals connect to each other, and it's made up of multiple distinct aspects, so it can look really different for everybody. For some people, it may be family, friends, or community activities. Overall, we want to know about your experiences.
Okay, but why is this project important?
Well, because there are around 1.25 million young caregivers in Canada, which means it's a huge problem that affects a lot of people. This project will also be a great opportunity for you to connect with other people who have similar experiences providing care. Think of it as a project by and for young caregivers. You can pause the video here to see the list of criteria of individuals we're recruiting for our project. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about our work or want to get involved in any way, you can scan the QR code or send us an email. Let's all come together to support our young caregivers in the dementia community. Thank you so much.
So I'm wondering about that video. What were things that stood out to you that were effective? Let's share in the chat. What were things that worked in that video for you that were effective? Maybe things that I mentioned before. I know that with Ty, he did start with the story of being a young caregiver to his grandmother, Alicia, which I think is a really great way of, again, tying into like, this is why you should participate with me. Yeah. Olive said illustrating and being left out. Sydney T said the dramatization with a sprinkle of humor. Yeah, I think a sprinkle of humor is always really great. Even, with the connections conversations, having Byrne in the background, doing his amazing musical accompaniment kind of adds a bit of fun. Sydney G said, not too much text, can listen to the speaker. Okay. Yeah. And also if that's another thing to add is like, you could add just like an English transcript that's clickable underneath in the description of the YouTube page, if it's something that, if you don't want to have closed captions, or if you don't know, maybe inputting closed captions in a video is something that you're not sure about, just having that clickable PDF is something we can do. Anyone else want to add to that specific video? Okay. Okay, great. All right. So the next thing that I want to really talk about is, putting this together on what I would say is a project website. And why is it important to make a project website? I've done them before. I am not someone that has ever been digitally savvy. And I'm not someone that was trained in, how to build a website or brand or do editing. I've just kind of, puddled with it on my own and have created new skills for myself that actually are transferable to today, what I'm doing today with Age Well, which is great. But why make a project website? So a really big part about this is it works as an accessible platform for potential participants to learn about your research. It serves as like an information hub about what you're doing and will help inform potential participants to really decide if it's something that they would like to do to work with you. Websites can also serve as a critical communication tool for you to share updates, contact information, and also just like a section on frequently asked questions. So for example, if you are doing a larger project and you are trying to recruit a kind of a larger group of older adult participants or healthcare workers or caregivers, sometimes having that go-to webpage where maybe you have already anticipated some of those questions of concern, you can have that in the section of your website and really talk about, this is how I'm going to be working through this, or this is how I will be, dealing with this. And that creates also like a sense of confidence and showing like a level of expertise that often moving beyond just the poster. And again, it will also potentially elevate that kind of searchability of your project. And you can also include some of those digital recruitments that, for example, that informational video. and also testimonials. So again, it's kind of always building up that what I would call is like the brand of your project. So if you have and I'm going to touch on it soon, but if you've made an advisory board, for example, on this of potential people, community members that are helping you with your project, you can actually put that on your website. And again, that builds that trustworthiness with you and your potential participants, and also knowing that they have a feeling that people from their community have already looked at the project and have given advice. It's like, okay, this is maybe potentially this is a safe space for me to participate in. And it also can potentially integrate and streamline the recruitment process itself. So what I mean by that is you potentially can put their surveys on that website, or questionnaires. But what I would say, just to be careful, as if you are asking for personal information on your website from your potential participants, or, creating like a mailing list, really make sure that the website that you're working from is not necessarily sharing that information with third parties. This is something I need to learn more about, but it's something that I think all of us should be careful of as we're doing recruitment, especially through online platforms. So really make sure that you are double checking that, and I'll share that on your website that we've done the double check of, that this is completely privatized in the way we're doing this, and that none of your contact information will be shared with third parties. Okay, and some of those websites, those can be actually, like, I personally have used WordPress. It's free. I'm all about the free. And I find WordPress is great, especially for accessibility with image descriptions, uploading, videos. It's very user friendly. There's also Squarespace, and actually the Care for Cares have used Canva. That's another one. But choose one that you feel is comfortable, and you can always go online and do like a YouTube kind of tutorial. So I'll just take another 5 minutes and then we'll go into questions. So the big thing that I also want to say is create an advisory board, particularly for those of you that are doing more, really want to reach out to more equitable groups that are really focusing on equity, and maybe that are under represented communities, especially in health research. Having an advisory board is super important. So an advisory board is a group of individuals coming from community members, coming from usually the group that you are trying to solve a problem for, and there are potential user stakeholders that provide guidance, insights, and feedback to your research. So they're going to give that community perspective, especially when it comes down to thinking through that everything you're doing is relevant and ethical and feasible to the communities that you want to work and prioritize with. Often these individuals do receive compensation, and when I share this webinar, I'll make sure to share what the age-well rates of compensation that we use. But the big thing is, if you don't have access to funding, the other thing too is just to emphasize the so what. And you can always meet with a knowledge user or someone in the actual, like in a cafe or something, and just pay for their coffee. And even if it's just for an hour, just getting that feedback from a knowledge user is really important. But if you are able to do an advisory board, that's great. And again, talking with them about, that compensation is really important. Your university might have standards of what specific compensation rates they can do, but always ask the community member what they usually would ask for, because that's the most important. And if it's below the below the rate of what the recommendation from the university you work at, go with the higher one, which is like the university one. Always, often sometimes I think a lot of us we underestimate the value of the work, and underestimate ourselves in terms of what we should be getting as consultants. So those are things to consider. And again, these are people that would be able to advise you on cultural sensitivities, and also like preferences and that older adults might have around, how they want to be reached out to. And they'll also guide appropriate ways to communicate research problems. Again, that knowledge translation factor. How do I, make my research be relevant and matter to the potential people that I want to work with? What is the language that I'm using? And they're also going to, again, that kind of testimonial, that way of creating that trust, they're going to vouch for the credibility, your credibility and trustworthiness. If you are working, if you're trying to recruit people and they know that you already are working with a community member from the get-go, that is going to mean a lot to those older adults. And beyond that, these are people, especially the knowledge users and advisory board members, always remember that they should also be credited in many ways as research partners or collaborators. And also, knowledge users will also help identify channels and community organizations that maybe you have not thought of, address concerns and misconceptions about maybe the way that you are approaching your work. And they're going to they're going to help you edit and tailor the ways you're doing your recruitment process. And best part is word of mouth. They are going to know people that know people that know people, and they're going to share that project and help you connect you with potential research participants. I'm going to skip this one for now, but it's just a question to think about. It's like, how do we find potential knowledge users in our networks? I'm going to actually say LinkedIn is a big one. It's one that's underestimated. LinkedIn is a great one to use because it includes, you can type in potentially like a word and you're going to come out with different community organizations that you can directly contact and ask, like, do you have someone in your network that is, an expert in this or has a lived experience of this that might be interested in working with me? So in the chat, maybe think about that. Share ways that, we can, connect and find potential knowledge users. Share that in the chat right now and I'll continue to go. But with this last slide that I wanted to share is how do we do things at AgeWell? And so when it comes to sharing a specific research call within our network, something to consider for us is we can only share research calls from network members. So you have to be an AgeWell member and you have to be often working with someone that's funded, doing a funded project, because we are not necessarily a network that's constantly sharing research calls. That's not necessarily what we're mandated for, but we do it, every 2 months or so. But beyond that, and they have to be ethics approved as well. But beyond just us, this format itself is a really great way of thinking of how to share your work, whether that be through your poster, the video that you're making on your website. What is it? And so I like to think it as like an ad in a newspaper, right? This very short space that you have, this window, literally, of space that you have to share your work. And so it's about really making a 100-word research call. Define the participants that you want to work with. What are the benefits of the project and participating in the project? Outline how long, what's like the expected kind of things you are doing in that participation. Specify the location. Is it going to be on campus or virtual? Or best thing to do is to go to them, especially with older adults. If you're going to be able to travel, if you're going to be able to cover travel, if they are coming to you, emphasize accessibility. So if it's in a building that's inaccessible, you need to let them know that. Make sure to mention, that where you've been approved in terms of ethics and at the institution. And like the layman's terms is like, start with an impactful question. And that's kind of like when you think of the newspaper, there's like that kind of opening question. And also, like, if you have a poster in terms of AgeWell, we always can share that poster. We can link that poster so that if people are interested, or if you have a website as well. But with that, there's so many more things that I'd like to share today that maybe we can do in the next few minutes. But with that, I just want to kind of give a little bit, this is where you can reach us at least for the education and training. But let's open it up to questions and to comments. Who has questions and comments? I could keep going and talking about this. But yeah, questions and comments, please. I did see that Brittany did make a comment. In terms of accessibility, she said something I noticed a lot of people don't think about is color blindness. Absolutely, when making graphs and logos. Just a reminder for everyone. Yes, absolutely. And on that note, as people are maybe sharing their questions or comments, I do want to just share like a great resource. They're based in Ottawa. It's open. It's the Collaboration for Cognitive Accessibility. I'm sorry. I'll put their website in the chat. But this is a great resource if you are looking into finding best practices in terms of making your recruitment materials more accessible. This is a great way to connect. Okay, I don't see any questions just yet. But Michelle asks, these are all great ideas. Can you speak to institutional hurdles in the REB processes when trying to seek approval for innovative methods, i.e. methods beyond the poster? Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's if you're able to come with drafting of those, I think it's important to share those logos and ways of recruitment actually in your REB application right away, so that at least even if they're a draft and they're not the final version. And I actually would argue that I think a lot of REB boards will, research ethics boards are going to be very happy to see that, like the actual advancement of this. I know for a lot of my colleagues, Instagram stories is a way that people have used to share their recruitment processes. Sometimes it's even just like a matter of like, someone's grandchild seeing something on their Instagram story and then sharing that with their grandparent. Again, word of mouth and social media, the two are connected. They're not isolated. So I definitely think having those materials ready is important. You can also maybe share that you've already reviewed them with members of the community and that you already maybe have built and that you've built them according to accessibility recommendations, which Brittany was really great at pointing out. Olive, thank you so much for the kind ways to recruit, connect people. Yes, thank you, Olive, for the nice comment. Farah is asking, is there any best practice guideline available on how to make participation easy for older adults, especially who are underrepresented in healthcare and health research? So I would say, yes. So something that we're doing right now actually is AgeWell is currently doing an EDI webinar series, partnered with the UHN on actually connecting with, specifically focusing on like how to do health research specifically with like underrepresented communities. So I think having those resources is great. I also think something I didn't mention in my presentation today that I wanted to go more into is actually toolkits. So many community organizations right now are creating toolkits of recruitment and how to work with people, especially from underrepresented communities. And toolkits essentially are like giving those best practices of how to engage with the communities that they represent, because there's so many researchers that are coming to them all the time and like, I don't know how to do this, like how do I connect with members of BIPOC communities? So looking for literally just typing in toolkits for and then typing in recruiting people with dementia, you'll actually see some great toolkits that pop up. So that's something that I would definitely recommend. Are there other questions or things that people would like to talk about? Okay, yeah, thanks, Farah. I would also just like to say, like, newsletters, and this is something I mentioned in my first one, so I know this one's building off of the first one that I did, but newsletters are a great way of sharing. So if you are able to share that kind of like 100-word call, and asking if that call could be shared in a potential newsletter from a community organization that you would like to connect with, that's another great way of connecting with some of those community organizations. And those community organizations, sometimes those newsletters are still paper, they're not paperless. So that's another way of thinking through that, especially for individuals that live in more remote areas. Is there other questions or concerns? Okay. So again, I really hope that some of this was helpful. Like I said, never isolate online methods from ones that are not for that are not online. They're always interconnected. Everything's always interconnected, whether that be like I said, someone sees something online and then shares that word of mouth with a colleague, and then they share word of mouth. There's everything's always interconnected. So never isolate yourself to one way of working, and absolutely prioritize working with knowledge users, those stakeholders of your work, to help advance your perception of that recruitment process. So with that, I thank you so much, everyone, for attending today's webinar. I wish you a happy Wednesday, Thursday, I'm sorry, a happy Thursday. And this is actually my last webinar like this with AgeWell. So I just want to thank you all for just an amazing time and connection. And I look forward to other conversations. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm still available to connect with through my AgeWell email. So with that, have a great one, everyone, and happy recruiting. Okay, bye, everyone.